All the volunteer work I've done, organizing over the years, one of the things I'm proudest of, frankly, is the First and Second Avenue bike path. The whole reconfiguration of First and Second Avenue, so that you've got a protected bike lane on the left-hand side, you have a dedicated bus lane on the right-hand side, and yes, you have reduced right-of-way for private motor vehicles, which is probably the lowest use of our streets here in New York City, and should be treated and allocated with space lesser than those bicycling uses, which are more efficient, as well as the bus uses, mass transit, which are more efficient still. So 2008, 2009, we pitched this idea to elected officials and said, we want to redesign First and Second Avenues like some of the avenues you see in European capitals and other parts of the world where they've embraced cycling and they want to support it with appropriate infrastructure. It took a little while, but we got most of the elected officials along the east side to sign on to the plan. And the idea, we went big. The idea was there should be a spine to the city bike lane network, a backbone that would stretch all the way from Manhattan Bridge all the way down south, which is the major way that people come into New York City from Brooklyn, and then go all the way up to East Harlem. And it wasn't, by mistake that we picked these avenues. It went through two of the neighborhoods that have, at that time, the highest biking rates in the city. The East Village, I recall, having the very highest daily biking rate of somewhere around 7, 8, 9% daily cyclists, and 25% of people who were bicycling weekly. Right behind the East Village, back at that time, you had East Harlem. Had a lot of working cyclists up there and others who used a bike to get around. And similar to the East Side, perhaps more so, not as many transit options. So we wanted a spine in the bike lane network running all the way from where Brooklynites come into Manhattan downtown for commuting and other purposes, all the way up past the Queensboro Bridge to connect to Queensboro and allow people coming in from Queens, wherever they're going, to be able to reach this major artery within Manhattan, and finally up to Harlem and the Bronx. And the Bronx is full of cyclists who really, compared to all the boroughs with the exception of Staten Island, have the least bike infrastructure. And we were very encouraged when the elected officials signed on. We started to build it out, and there were all sorts of issues. We had the Second Avenue subway going on at that time. People were saying, well, why don't we wait till the Second Avenue subway's done? There's always going to be a project going when you're trying to implement and execute on a grand project like the First and Second Avenue bikeways. We just said we'll fill them in later, because that's the way all these projects go. There are still gaps in the First and Second Avenue bikeways that are being filled in here and there. There's one, by the Queens Midtown Tunnel. It gets worked out over time. Whether it takes years or even decades, doesn't matter. The problem is starting, not finishing. It's so sweet and wonderful as we fill in the gaps, and we keep getting them fixed by the UN, by the Midtown Tunnel, and in other locations. One absolutely critical thing that happened, though, is there was a bike lash. Bike lash happened maybe 2014, 2015, while they were building out the bike lanes. A new deputy mayor was inserted between Mayor Bloomberg and Jeanette Sadek-Khan, the transportation commissioner, who had really gotten behind this project. And that deputy mayor said, it's too much. People on the Upper East and Upper East Side, where Mayor Bloomberg and some of his buddies live, they don't want bike lanes in their neighborhood. Let's just stop it at 34th Street. And that just completely ruined the idea. It ruined the connectivity. It left without bike infrastructure all those cyclists up in East Harlem. It left out, the connection to the Queensboro Bridge at 59th Street. It left out the connection to the Bronx. It was just going to be this stub that went from, the Manhattan Bridge up to 34th Street. We said, no, we can't have it stop there. It has to go all the way to Harlem. And at that point, there was even some division within the cycling community, or I should say within the cycling advocacy organizations, because, they were getting a signal from the DOT, like, don't push this, just wait, just be patient, it'll take time. You know, frankly, our committee, our Manhattan committee at the time, which I was the elected leader of, decided we couldn't wait. And frankly, we went a bit rogue. We were a committee of transportation alternatives, but we decided to start doing a campaign once we got the agreement that, you know, basically they'd let us do it. Even though they knew where we were doing it, they understood why we were doing it. It couldn't be an official TA production. We said, you know, there's so many different ways of people to express their opinion, especially digitally now. You can sign a petition or send a fax by pushing a button on your phone. We wanted to do something that was really meaningful. We came up with the idea of handwritten letters. And we set up stations of canvassers at the points where cyclists are found, you know, coming off the bridges, up in Harlem. Wherever you find lots of cyclists who get stuck at a red light, you're gonna be like, the letter doesn't have to be long, but we want a handwritten letter that says, "Dear Mayor Bloomberg, you can't end the bikeway at 34th Street. I live uptown, I commute every day. Don't forget about your constituents who live uptown," and maybe 100 other things. But we would just get the people as they came off the bridge or they were stopped at the stop sign, and we said, no, it's got to be a handwritten letter. And they wanted to just sign a petition. No, got to be a handwritten letter. And we insisted, and they do it because they understood it was important. I met so many interesting cyclists I never would have met otherwise, because I got them to stop for one or maybe even two light cycles as they were writing out their handwritten letter explaining why this project was absolutely crucial to making New York into a city that works by bike. And, you know, at the end of the day, that deputy mayor who was trying to shut us down, well, you know, it turns out he was beating his spouse. He disappeared, got rid of him, and we got the 1st and 2nd Avenue bike lanes all the way up to Harlem, which was our battle cry. And, you know, it just means so much. People take it for granted, but when you consider all the people who are using these bike lanes, this is because it's a single trip on a single route. It's just so easy. Hop on your bike and go, and you're connecting 4 of the 5 boroughs in New York City. People took a while to get used to the design of the bike lanes, and the city actually didn't do a great job of explaining to them how to safely navigate them. For example, on the Manhattan grid, where the streets alternate eastbound and westbound one way, you have a turning conflict with the motorists on 2nd Avenue who are trying to turn left onto eastbound avenues every other block. So what do? How do you navigate that turning conflict? Well, the advice from DOT was don't hug the curb. That's about 10% of the advice they should have given. What they should have explained was look over your shoulder to the right, see if there's a motorist coming into what's called the mixing zone, preparing to make a left turn across the bike lane at the intersection to get onto the eastbound street, and then figure out a way, negotiate with that motorist, try to get their eye, try to put your hand out if you're going to try to go first. Whatever it is, communicate in that mixing zone. Because that's the essence of safe urban transportation in these crowded shared spaces, is communication and negotiation. And even though there are so-called yield teeth, those little white triangles that no one knows what they mean, that govern the motorist entrance into the mixing zone, preparatory to making a left turn across a protected bike path, sometimes you have to yield, because that's just the exigencies and circumstances. It's just who got there first, who's close to making their turn versus who isn't. You can't go strictly by the rules. It's a negotiation. That's the essence of safe urban cycling, is recognizing the potential conflict, planning for it, initiating communication with the others to make sure that they're safe, and then everyone yields or doesn't yield as the situation goes. And as long as people are paying attention, it's safe. So one of the absolutely critical messages that for some reason government doesn't give regarding these parking protected bike lanes is you shouldn't just not hug the curb. You should be going way out, perhaps outside of the bicycle lane, in order to navigate through a mixing zone that's congested with cars waiting to turn across your path. Just go around them and pass them on their right. And typically that is your safest move. I'm not saying don't do it without looking. From the viewpoint of a motorist who's zipping past that on a through lane, they may view you as popping out, so you don't want to pop out in front of a motorist and change a lane. You would be putting yourself in a bad situation that way and potentially causing a crash. But as long as you know what's going on around you, you have that situational awareness, you can make sure that people see you. You can use your hands and gestures and your eyes to let people know what you're about to do. And you can safely navigate the conflicts that arise every other block on these protected bike paths. Now, when it comes to the two-way streets, like 14th Street right here, the city did put in separate dedicated bicycle form signals. So it's a bike-shaped signal, red, yellow, and green, that tells you when it's safe to go. And it in fact tells the cyclists that they must stop. There's a red light when the motorists have a green turn phase, and the motorists get a green turn arrow, and the cyclists wait. People are going in turns. Some people get frustrated by that. They would rather just navigate their way right through them. You've got to be careful if you're going through a red light. It's on you if there's contact that occurs. Some people think that they're not going through the red light if they change out of the bike lane and go into the motorist lane, and then they go through the intersection when they have a red bicycle on the bike lane, but there's a green vehicular signal. Well, that is a violation of the law without question. But I will say that most police will write that ticket that they give you not as one for a red light because you evaded the red bicycle form light by moving over one lane to the right. They'll probably give you a violation of violating a traffic device, not riding in the bike lane when you should have been, which is $50 as compared to $200 or more. So there might be some logic behind committing that sort of violation if that's the way you're operating on your bike, something to keep in mind. But it's really just these turning conflicts that are the sort of remaining outstanding issue with this design. Otherwise, the design is great and it's perfect. It allocates a dedicated right-of-way for mass transit on the surface, which are the bus lanes. You have a dedicated bicycle lane, and now they're going back and changing them to make them wider. Double-sized bike lanes because there's so much bike traffic. And we have absolutely shifted a great deal of traffic onto bikes. Certainly commercial traffic. When was the last time you saw someone in a sedan with a Domino's pizza thing up on top, delivering pizzas in the city in New York? People are doing it by bike. And what that means is they're taking up less space. They're probably getting it there faster. And, it's what this program is all about. So this design is a winner. I've seen it cropping up in all sorts of other cities, from Jersey City on westward out through other cities in the United States. And we should be putting them into every city where we can to support and grow the density of our cities by allowing more dense transportation on bikes and on mass transit instead of the anemic and inefficient private motor vehicle subsidy of giving over all of the streets to private motor vehicles. Great idea. So glad we made it done. And I feel so glad every time I ride up or down 1st or 2nd Avenue that we were able to build out this backbone of our New York City bike network to cover 4 of the 5 boroughs.